Okay, so now we're ready. So as I mentioned, my name is Richard Hinton. With me are a number of our members of the Validation Hub. I'll get them to introduce themselves in a minute, but just to give you an idea of what's going to happen today. So we have Maxwell and Annika who will be leading the webinar today, and it'll be a combination of both presentation and then live demo of JOSM. So if you are completely new to JOSM, you don't know really much about it, you're sort of interested to learn more, this is a good spot to be. If you use JOSM a little bit and you want to maybe reinforce some of those things you know, but want to learn a little bit more and perhaps ask some questions, this is a good spot. If you just like to come to YouthMappers activities and you know JOSM and you have something to contribute, this is a great spot as well. I'm happy to have you. I do see some familiar names in our list here, so welcome back and good to see you guys coming back again. I really appreciate your support and coming back to get involved, staying involved with our presentations and our trainings. As we sort of do the introductions around here, pardon me, if you wouldn't mind, just add yourself to the thread, to the channel, to the chat, sorry, and just say hi and let us know where you're calling in from, where you're coming in from today. And with that, I'm going to ask each of the members of the hub to introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll get going. All right, so Maxwell, I'll start with you.
Okay, hi everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Maxwell, and today I'll be leading you with Intro to JOSM. I have been with the Validation Hub for almost 2 years now. I'm a recent graduate at the George Washington University, and I'm happy to have you here to listen to me.
Awesome. Annika.
Hi, everyone. My name is Annika. I'm also a recent graduate of GW, and I've been with the Validation Hub for probably about 1.5 years, maybe almost 2 years now. And I'm going to be working with Maxwell to present our presentation to you today. So, yeah.
That's it. Naza.
Hi, everyone. I'm Naza. I'm a current student at the George Washington University, and I just joined the Validation Hub over the summer.
Excellent. Flora.
Hi, my name is Flora. I'm also a student at the George Washington University, and I also just joined the Validation Hub this past summer.
Excellent. Now, Espy, I know you're not feeling well. I'm not sure if you want to take yourself off mute to introduce yourself.
I will take myself off mute. Hi, everyone. I'm Espy. I am going into my 2nd year of grad school at George Washington University, and I joined the Validation Hub just a few months ago. So yeah, still relatively new. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Espy. And last but not least is Sarah. And I was communicating with Sarah. She can listen to us and can see us, but she doesn't have a working microphone right now. She's traveling. So Sarah, like Annika, recently graduated. She's been with the hub over the last year or so as a validator. And I'll leave her to sort of further introduce herself through the chat. And we'll see as we sort of get going here. A couple reminders that if you have questions, please put them in the chat. And please keep yourself on mute while we're listening to the presentation. We will do our best while the presentation is going on to address the various questions that come on. But during the presentation itself, Maxwell and Annika will actually pause at different times to make sure we capture all the questions and any sort of queries you guys may have. And again, if you would mind in the chat window, please just put in hello, your name, and where you're coming in from, where you're calling in from today. It'd be great to see where people are all are, what parts of the world we're touching in today. As I mentioned, this is being recorded, and once we're done and it's been processed, we'll make the recording available to everybody that registered for this particular presentation. Okay, with that, I think I'm going to be quiet and put myself on mute, and I'll hand it over to Maxwell and Annika.
All right, give me a minute to set up my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as you all know, today we are going to talk about introduction to JOSM. So it's going to be mainly about basic intro to how to set it up, and then also show some live demo on how you can actually start or get started with JOSM. And I also want to say that if you want to get more into JOSM too, in the coming months, we also have advanced JOSM, which will also take your mapping or editing to a different step. So to set the ball rolling, what is JOSM? People call it Java OpenStreet Editor, JOSM, JOSM, whatever you want to call it. It's basically a desktop editing application for OSM. So what makes it special is it runs on Windows, Mac, Linux OS. So you have a lot of flexibilities, and it's a standalone application. JOSM is more stable, and it provides advanced editing tools that makes mapping very easy. One thing about JOSM is you can actually work offline when you download the data into JOSM. So you do all your editing in JOSM and then you push it back. Doing that helps to save internet data, and then you can also be more productive. When you download data into JOSM, you work locally on your PC or Mac, and then afterwards you push it back to the OSM server. One thing about JOSM is also about the validation checks. So we have several validation checks that actually runs before your data or your edit is being pushed. This actually helps you to check some mistakes or some errors, and then minimize these errors before you push your data into the OSM server. I must say, JOSM to begin with looks a little bit intimidating, but as you keep using it, you'll find it very handy and useful, and also make your mapping more efficient. Of course, there are also a lot of shortcuts that you will see during the demo. So this picture, actually, I want to show you how JOSM actually looks like when you open it up. So you will see this interface, which looks like a lot is going on, but then trust me, it's a very good software, and you will have a lot of things to do. It makes your mapping super fast and easy. In this image on my left is the ID editor compared to JOSM. And here I want to show how fast you can quickly map JOSM. So on the JOSM, you have this building plugin. And as you can see from this GIF, it maps automatically tags and then also square building, compared to our ID editor, where you have to do a lot of clicks, square buildings, and also add tags, taking a lot of time. So with JOSM, it makes mapping quite faster. So this is just some links about more trainings on JOSM that you can also have a look. We will share you the slides, so you don't need to worry about them for now. So let's start with installing JOSM. Before you can actually use JOSM on your machine, you will have to first download and install Java. You can actually do that by going to the Java website and downloading the most recent Java software, and then you install it before you can actually install JOSM. The reason is JOSM actually runs on Java, so you need Java 8 or higher to be able to run it. And afterwards, after installing Java, then you will have to install JOSM. So you can also go to the JOSM.openstreet.de to actually download the most recent version, which is also stable, and then you install it on your local machine. So now let's walk through a little bit about JOSM and then how it actually looks like. So when you first download JOSM, install it and you open it, this is what actually you will see on your first open. So it will talk about updates. It also gives you different versions and different languages. And then you see this nice looking interface, I would say. So to set up JOSM, the first thing you have to do is to think about how do you link your OpenStreet user account to JOSM. And JOSM make it easy to do that by going to preferences, and then you select the connection settings. You have the authorize. Now you put in your credentials, that is your username and your password, and then you save it, and JOSM only need you to do it once, and then it will create a token for you. And then anytime you open JOSM, it knows that it is you, and then it's linked to your account. And when you do that, it allows you to now communicate with the OpenStreet server or database. And then one other step that you have to also do is to set up the remote control. This actually allows you to download data from the OpenStreet server directly onto your local machine. So it's just a simple step. Still, you go to preferences and you will see the remote control settings. All what you just need to do is to enable remote control by checking that box, and then you hit on OK. What makes JOSM really good and powerful is its several options with plugins. So over the years, there are several plugins that provide different functionalities that makes mapping JOSM very good. Here we will talk about a few of these plugins, but then there are several plugins that can actually serve a lot of your use cases. So to do that, still you go to preferences, and then you select plugin, and then the plugin will give you the option to search for all the plugins that you will want to install. And after that, you download and install it. Popular plugins that we use is the buildings tool, which we will show you in the coming slides. It's really powerful, and it makes mapping super fast and super efficient. With the buildings tool, you can simply get building squared and also automatically add tags like building is equal to yes. We also encourage you to also have the utils plugin tool and the Mapatona. So you also install the utils plugin tool and the Mapatona, which also gives you several other functionalities. For example, with the Mapatona, you can do map several buildings, like bunch of buildings at once, and it makes you mapping or editing super fast and efficient. So this is how JOSM looks like. Here we are showing 5 main menus that you will see. We have the main menu, which provides you with all the menus like the file, edit, tools, select, and then we have the shortcuts where usually you can customize it a little bit, and then you put all your frequently used shortcuts tools over there so that you can quickly have access to that. There is the information panel, which actually gives you information about what you're doing. For example, we have the layers that shows you which layer you are working on. When you load an imagery, it goes into the layer, and then you will have different layers, and then you can turn it on and turn it off. The tag and membership actually gives information about the tags, and then the relationships between the objects or elements that you mapping. And it also gives you extra information. On the left side, you have the edit tool, where you also see the common edit tools that you will most likely to use, like the buildings, the art, the select tool is all there. And then the black area is the map view, where you see the objects, and then also the imagery that you put background goes into the map view. So here I will move on to mapping some features, and afterwards we will do some demo. So to be able to get data into JOSM, there are several ways to actually do that. And one of the common ways is to go to File and then Download, and then it will take you to the download site, and then you just specify the area you want to download, and you have to zoom into an area that we encourage users to go for an area that you know, like your hometown or your neighborhood. You zoom into that area, and now you can simply download that area into JOSM and then can start editing. Another option is to go to the osm.org website. You also zoom into an area of your interest, and then you simply copy the URL on top of that area, and then you can come back into JOSM and then paste it in by going to Open Location from Files, and then you can you can paste it and then download also. There are several ways to also do that. If you are working in HOTS, you can also do that. One other thing that I also want to mention here is the imagery setup. So with the imagery setup, you have the option to select different images and then put it on the background for your edits. To do that, you go to imageries, and now you select the kind of imagery that you will want to use for your projects. And then when you put in the imagery, it will come under the layers section, and then you can have a list of layers with the layer 1 being the OSM data and the imagery below. When you download data into JOSM, this is what you will see. So the striped areas are areas that is outside your area of interest. So you are not supposed to edit in those areas. You only focus on the black area where you actually created for your area of interest. So in JOSM, they add this stripe to actually prevent you from mapping outside your area of interest. This actually helps you to focus on the area and also prevent duplication of layers if somebody else is also working in that area. And you can also actually change the visibility of your imagery. Sometimes when you load an imagery, it comes with different resolution or different colors. And in JOSM, you have the flexibility to actually change the visibility, like you change the colorfulness, the gamma, the opacity, and then this actually makes the resolution more clearer to your eyes so that you can see properly and map correctly. It is always a good practice to also compare different imagery sources. The reason is because some of the images might be old and some are recent, but then it doesn't mean that always recent images gives the best resolution. So if some place is not that clear, you can use other imageries to also check and correct that. So now let's move into JOSM and do some demo. Can you see my JOSM interface?
Yep, we can see it.
Great. So as I mentioned earlier on, anytime you launch JOSM, this is the interface that you will see. The first thing you will want to do as a beginner is to go to edits, that is on my menu bar on my top left corner, and you go to preferences. And this open another window, and then you will now go to OSM saver. You now put in your credentials. Usually you can use the use basic authentication, and you type in your OSM username and then your password, and then you now accept token, and then you will be in. I have already done mine, so I don't have to do it. So when you are done, you will now go back, still under preferences, you go back to remote control. As I mentioned earlier on, you have to make sure that you enable remote control here. As you can see, when I turn it off and I turn it back on, this allows you to create a connection between the OSM database and the local host on your machine, so that you can actually download data into JOSM to be able to use. When that is done, you can hit on OK. And one other thing is also about the plugin. So for the plugin, still you can also go to Edit, Preferences, and then on the preferences, you have the plugins here. You hit on plugins, and now you can simply search for the plugins. Sometimes when you download JOSM for the first time, you don't see the list. So we first have to click on the download list, and it will download all the lists, but then it will install it. And then you can manually look for all the plugins that you want, like the buildings 2 plugin, and then you just check them, and then you look for utils plugin, and then that one you check it, and then you check all the plugins that you will want to download, and afterwards you hit on update plugins or download plugins, and this will actually download and install the plugins for you. Also, be careful that we have all installed and available. So you will want to put it at all, so that you'll be able to have all the lists in case you are beginner. Because if you put it at install, it will only show the list that you've already installed, and that might be confusing to begin with. So when you install all the plugins, you simply hit on OK, and now it will install, and then you will be up for good. Some plugins might ask you to restart JOSM, others you don't need to do that. So now to provide JOSM with data or to download data, you will go to Files. So on my menu, you go to Files, and then you will go to Download Data. So when I hit on Download Data, it will open this new window for me, and the setup is set that you can't download a big area to actually work in. So you will want to zoom into a small area where you know that you can be able to finish it within a manageable time. So I will take this small area. And the thing is, if you actually have a big area, JOSM will complain that the area is too big, and then you will have to zoom in to get a smaller area to be able to download. And then you select the area, and then you hit on download, and then it will download the data from JOSM and now put it in for you. So as you can see, where I downloaded is the black area with all the data, and then any area outside where I actually specified as my area of interest is in these striped lines. So these areas in the striped lines are areas that you are not supposed to actually map, but you can actually map in your area of interest. So now that we've downloaded the imagery, another way is also to go to the osm.org, and now you also zoom into an area of your interest, a mostly area that you know, and you just copy the URL and you go back to JOSM and you go to files, open location, and just paste in the URL that you have and just hit on download. And then it will also download the new area for you. What you will realize is when you put in the data and then you come to the layers menu, you have one layer here specifying the area that you actually downloaded. So when I turn it off, there's nothing on, I turn it on, then you will see this is the layer that you are working on. So here, you can also download it from the hot tagging manager also. So I will now show you how you can get an imagery. So if you want to get an imagery, you go to imagery, still on the menu bar, imagery, and then you choose from the list of imagery. So here I'm going to choose bin area imagery. So when I choose it and then I put it on the background, this is how it actually looks like. I can turn off the OSM data to see the imagery. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes the resolution or the image is not that clear. So you will want to play with the settings a little bit to adjust it to your setting. So to be able to do that, you make sure you select from the layers, you activate the bin area imagery. And now from here, you come to this icon here, and then you select that and you have a lot of options in relation to how you can set the colorfulness, the gamma, and the sharpness. So if I change the colorfulness, you will see it's changing a little bit. When I change the gamma, you see the resolution changes a little bit. So this is one of the ways that you will have to play with these kind of settings in some cases where the imagery is not clear, to make it clear for you to be able to start editing. When you load an imagery like this and you place in the object, you'll also see that sometimes it doesn't really align with the background imagery. So you will want to first thing that we always encourage you do is to check if the background imagery aligns with the objects that is already being mapped. So here you can see, for example, looking at this big building, there is a little bit of shift. And to be able to do that, you will go to still under imagery, and then there is new offsets. So here you will simply select the offsets, and now you can now drag in to actually make sure that the imagery aligns with the objects. And you zoom into other areas to make sure that they are all aligned. And mostly in practice, you will have to make sure that it's aligned, and you have to make sure that at least most of the areas align with the objects that you are trying to map. At this point, does anybody have any questions for me?
There's nothing that's been popping up in the chat. So if anybody has a quick question and they don't want to take themselves off mute, you can do so now, or we can continue on with the rest. Just give it a beat here. There's one in the chat. How do I activate layers?
Okay. So to turn on and off layers, you can see from the layer on the right side, and then you see this icon there. So when you select on it, you can turn it off by selecting it, and then same selecting it to also turn it off. And then this is actually the layers that you can also switch between layers to also activate them. And you can also have like more than one data downloaded into JOSM. For example, when I go to download data and then I specify a specific area, I can also download just one data into my area. So there are several ways that you can actually also do it and also have different layers. You can also duplicate your layers. I mean, just think of it as a normal GIS software where you have different layers that you can also modify.
One thing I'll mention just as you get the slide set up there, Maxwell, that when Maxwell was showing you how you can set up the things you need to do to set up the JOSM at the very beginning, the preferences and whatnot, setting the remote control and adding the plugins and whatnot. The nice thing is once you set that up and you've added your OSM credentials, you typically only need to do that once. Then your instance of JOSM will remember that. And so it'll look for updates for your plugins. And if you need another plugin, you can always go back and add more plugins or remove them that you want. But once you have that sort of initial setup done with JOSM, your computer or the software will remember. So next time you log in, you don't have to go to preferences, put in your OSM credentials, add the built-in plugin, et cetera, et cetera. You don't need to do that again. Everything will remain as you had it with your last instance. So that's one thing which is really nice with JOSM.
Okay. So at this point, I think I will stop sharing and hand it over to Anaka.
Thank you, Maxwell, for a wonderful start to our presentation. Give me just one moment to share my screen with you guys. You guys see that?
Yes. Yep. We're good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the beginning part of our presentation was a lot about how do you download JOSM, how do you download your layers and your data, how do you add the plugins you want. And the second half of our presentation is going to focus more on the actual editing process. Once you've gotten all that stuff out of the way, you've loaded up your layers and you're looking at it in the program, you know, what do you do with it now? So in JOSM, you can add points, lines, and shapes that represent real life locations. And the way that we're going to do this is by using the draw tool to do new points, new lines, new features. And then we're going to describe these features by assigning them a tag that you can either write yourself or select from the JOSM preset menu. So the basic operations when you get into JOSM, your right mouse button, you hold that down, it's going to let you move the map around to see the entire study area that you're focusing on. The left mouse button is, of course, going to let you, you know, click your different buttons, click your different features, create features. And then to scroll in and out, you just use the scroll wheel on your mouse, like usual. So there are three main things that we can do when we're editing in JOSM. The first one would be to select an existing element. When you select an element, you can view its tags, you can edit those tags, you can, if it's, you know, in the wrong spot, you can move it, resize it, rotate it. But it's a feature that already exists and is already assigned tags and information, and that's stuff that you don't really want to mess with. Secondly, we can add a new element. So if something is missing, a road is not drawn, a building's not drawn, you'll be able to create those, give it the proper tags. And then finally, we can delete elements. Typically, when we're editing a layer and somebody else has put in the work to include an element on those, we don't really want to delete them. I would say the best practice is always to try and see if you can move that feature somewhere else where it really does belong, or fix the tag so it makes sense. But I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes you are going to have to delete things that either are not showing up on the imagery or just are not mapped correctly. So you can also delete objects while you're working in JOSM. So the basic elements that you're going to find in JOSM are nodes, ways, and a closed way or area. This corresponds directly to points, lines, and polygons that you've probably heard people talk about in other mapping softwares. So nodes just represent points or dots that are used to mark specific locations. Nodes are one point in space. They have a latitude and a longitude, and you can assign various tags to points. I see a lot of times people use points to do like the names of buildings, or if something's like an office or a place of business, the point will say what they sell, or what they specialize in. Secondly, we have ways, which is just a list of nodes or a continued like line of nodes. They're usually used to describe roadways, pathways, anything like that is going to be considered a way. And then finally, we have closed ways or areas. And this is what you're going to use to do your buildings, any residential areas, commercial areas. Basically, if you have any other shape that's not a line or a point, it's going to be a closed way. Okay, and the way that you're going to go about drawing these features, you're going to start with a node, which is just individual points. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you don't have anything else selected. If you have a building or a feature selected in JOSM, when you go to create new things, they'll try to create those new features based off of what you already have selected, and that can just get messy. So just make sure your selection is clear by pressing the escape button. And then you can either press the A button on your keyboard, or when I load into the demo in a few moments, you'll be able to see where all the buttons on your toolbar will be. So you either press A, or you can just select the draw button right off your toolbar. And to create a node, you're just going to click the left mouse button wherever you want the node to be. Double click to finish editing. So you click the first time to create the node. If you continue to move your mouse around after you click that first time, it will continue to draw a way for you. So just double click to create one single point. And then you can return to select mode and assign that point whatever attributes or tags you'd like to assign it. Drawing away, going to be pretty self-explanatory. And so what you do to draw away is you just start off exactly how you were drawing those nodes. You click one, and then instead of double clicking to end, you're just going to keep going along in whatever direction you want, adding those nodes when you think it's necessary. And then to finish, you will double click the very last node in your way, and then you'll have a completed line segment that you can assign as a pathway or a road or a fence or whatever feature you're trying to map. So this demo right here is just going to show you really quickly kind of what it looks like to draw a road once you have JOSM loaded up. Kind of reiterating what was in the first slide. You're either going to select the draw tool right from your toolbar or press the A button. You're going to trace that road by creating a segment of nodes. And then after that road has been created, you can click on it and assign attributes to it as you see in this pop-up that shows up over here for us. There's a bunch of useful resources that OpenStreetMap gives us to show how you should tag roads and how you should classify them. And those resources will be shared with you guys at the end. So if you're not exactly sure, what type of road you're mapping, there are plenty of resources for you to try and figure it out. Okay, mapping land use. This is when you have an area of multiple buildings, or maybe an area of like fields or something, but an area that has similar features all within it. You know, all the features are being used for one thing. In the example to our right here, we are doing a residential land use feature. So you can see there's going around all the homes that are residential homes people are living in. And then after they create that feature, they're assigning the residential land use tag to it. And then just to kind of give you a little bit more information on tags before we get into, you know, mapping buildings and all of that stuff. Tags are just used to describe whatever feature you're mapping in OpenStreetMap. They describe the geographic data. So they're just like descriptions or attributes that you attach to each of the elements. And the way tags are structured is it's a key equals value. So on the previous slide, our key would have been land use and our value would have been residential. And that's showing us that this is a land use feature, and more specifically, it is land use for residential areas. So yeah, the key is more of a general classification of the feature. Another really common key is like building equals yes. So the key would be building, or if you're mapping like a road or a highway, it would be like highway equals residential, highway equals path. In that case, the key would be highway. And values just kind of let you get a little bit more specific and say, you know, what type of building is this? What type of road is this? And sometimes you're only going to be able to add that more specific value if you have local knowledge. Sometimes you might be doing mapping where you really only have information for the keys, which is kind of where building equals yes comes from. But if you have the more specific information about the values, it's always a good thing to add them. So, and you can add them using a presets option that's already in JOSM. So after you create a feature, whether it be a point, a way, you know, a polygon, there will be a little preset button that you can choose, and then it'll just let you select from these drop downs that you see from, you know, a generic set of keys and a set of values they have that correspond with those keys. So like I said, if you're not exactly sure how to tag something, JOSM has a bunch of presets you can scroll through, and hopefully looking through those will help you out. If not, OpenStreetMap has a ton of resources about, you know, how to tag certain things. So, and here's just kind of like a more specific view of what it looks to add a preset. So at the very top of JOSM, you'll have this little preset button. And as you can see, it has highways, water, you know, all the keys that you would find. And then as you click on them, you can get more specific and kind of fill in those values as well. Okay, now we are on to mapping buildings. Most mapping tasks, whether they be in HOT or Teach or, you know, another, you know, mapping software for another project, buildings are typically the main focus for mapping tasks like this. So it's important that we're doing them correctly to the best of our ability. So to create a building, these next few slides are going to assume that you have the building tools plugin installed, which is a really great plugin, and I highly recommend installing it. And when I do my JOSM demo in a few moments, I will kind of show you guys that in more detail. So just keep in mind, if you're looking at these slides later, this is telling you how to map buildings with the building preset, with the building tools plugin. If you do not have the building tools plugin, you just go to create a way or a node like you usually would, and you just trace around the entire object and complete it. But again, I'll explain this a little bit better during my demo. But for mapping buildings, you select the B on your keyboard to activate the building tool, or it will be found to the left in your toolbar. You just click on the corner of the building that you would like to create, and it'll automatically, give you a nice square or rectangle, depending on how far out you pull it. And it'll automatically be squared and everything. It'll automatically be squared and tagged as a building. If you would like to add more information, like what the name of the building is, or, if it's a shop or, offer some type of service, you will have to add that in manually, because the building tool will just tag it as a building. Okay. When you're using your building tool, they will automatically give you square or rectangular buildings, buildings with just 4 sides. If you come to a building that is not shaped that way, there are a bunch of cool ways that you can, fix that to make it more accurate. You can use the extrude tool, which is just simply selecting the X button on your keyboard, double clicking whatever segment of your building you would like to extrude. As you can see in the demo right here, they're going to double click right here, and then they can move this section freely without affecting the rest of the building. And so this is really good if you have like weird L-shaped buildings, or, just buildings that have a lot of weird places jutting out. Really useful tool. You can also do circular buildings. If you're using the building tool, there is a mode that allows you to do circular buildings super simply. All you have to do is draw the diameter of the building, as you're seeing in the demo on the slide. If you are not using the building mode tool, you can just use your draw button to just draw a circle, and then you're going to press the O button and it'll make it a nice, even, not weird looking circle for you. Yeah, and if you were using the building tool plugin, you can just use Alt-Z and Alt-R to switch in between the square and circular building modes. And then we have buildings with courtyards. So these are buildings that, have an open space in the middle where you don't want it to be displayed as, there being a roof or being a structure there. And the recommended way to do this would just be to fill out every side of the courtyard, and then just join all of those pieces together into one polygon. And there are a couple different ways you can do this that I'll display in just a moment. But this is the recommended one for when you're using the building tool plugin. So as you see in the demo, they're just going around the courtyard, tracing each side of the building. Then they select all of them. To select more than one feature at a time, you're just going to hold down the Shift button and click all the features you'd like to select. And then by hitting the J key, it'll turn it all into one big feature with a nice courtyard for you. And finally, you're probably going to come across buildings that have already been mapped, but, maybe they don't look the best. Maybe they're not on top of the feature that they're supposed to be on top of. And so you can always take existing buildings and edit them. Use the Shift Control to rotate your buildings. You can use Control Alt to resize, make them larger or smaller. And then if you have buildings that are accidentally connected to each other, and this can be buildings, roads. If you have any elements that are connected to each other that should not be, you can just hit the node that they share and hit the G key, and it'll separate them. And then you can fix them and resize them separately. Okay, now I'm going to switch to JOSM to give you guys a little demo. So just give me one moment to do that. Okay, I'm hoping you guys can see JOSM on my screen. If somebody could let me know, that would be great.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So this is just kind of a continuation of exactly where Maxwell left us off. I've downloaded JOSM. I have uploaded my data. I have selected my imagery, which is Bing aerial imagery. You can see it over here in my layers section. And now that I've done all this, loaded it in, got my plugins and everything, now I want to start editing. So what do I do now? Well, as you can see here to the left, this is where your toolbar is going to be. These are where all the buttons are that you're going to use to edit regularly. There's, of course, some more extra tools and stuff up here. But for the basic operations we're talking about today, you're going to want to focus on this left bar right here. So the first button up on your left bar is the select button. If you have this button selected, you can come in and just select features, move them around. You can come over here to the tag section. You can see how these features are tagged, what they're supposed to represent. Directly below that, we have the draw button. And this is what's going to actually allow you to place nodes and draw new features. And then right here, this button is the building tool. Again, like I said, this is a plugin, so this is something that you will have to download separately after downloading JOSM. But it's so worth it because it just makes these buildings so easy and it's so quick to do a bunch of buildings. So I really do highly recommend it, but just know that it is a plugin. It's not something that JOSM will just have when you load it up. So now that you kind of know where those are, we're just going to go through, drawing a basic way, a basic node, drawing a couple different shaped buildings for you guys, just so you can see it done. So the first thing we're going to want to do if we want to come in and draw a node, we're going to hit our draw tool, or you can hit A on your keyboard. To just place one node, we're just going to place it right there and then double click it. Because you see how I place it and then I go to move my mouse, it's going to come with me. So if you just want the node just in that place, just double click. Selected items will come up red, non-selected items will be yellow. And after you've placed that node, you can come over here to the tags, can add whatever tag you'd like. These are all the preset options they have for you. Another way to add tags is to come up here to the preset button and do it that way. So two different ways for you to add tags to your features, either up here at the top or over here on the right once they are selected. And then let's say you want to delete one of these nodes, you've put it in the wrong spot. Just use your select tool to select it. It'll highlight red, and then just hit the delete button on your keyboard and you'll delete it. If we want to make a way, pretty much the same idea as making the nodes. Let's just mimic this little road right here, or actually we can come down here and make this little driveway. So we want to start our way. If it's connected to another roadway, we can click right on the roadway. If it just starts, out in the open, we can just, click at whatever start point you want, and then just continue to add those points all the way down to the end. And when you first create this way, it's not going to have any tags associated with it. That's why it's coming up as this gray color. You come over here to tags. You can say it's highway equals residential. And then assign that tag. And then after you do that, it'll come up a little more, it's still gray, but it's easier for you to see. It's not as muted. And you can usually tell when things don't have tags assigned to them because they kind of the features look unfinished. They're not very present on the screen. So that's how you draw a way. Just continue on with your line of nodes until you're done, and then double click. Ooh, there you go. Okay. Now, if we would like to draw a building, we can just use this empty building right here as an example. If you have the buildings plugin installed, all you have to do is come in, click two corners, and just pull to whatever length you want, and it'll finish and fill out the building for you. It will only do square or circular buildings. So if you have these extrusions, you're going to have to do those manually by hand. And the way to do that, as discussed in the PowerPoint slide, is you're going to hit the X key on your keyboard. See, when I just have the draw tool, it's like this weird crosshair icon. If you hit the X key, then it'll switch. It's got this little kind of protractor button right under your mouse. And then you're just going to double click the areas that you would like to pull out or push in. You can see they're going to create nodes there, and then you can move that area freely. So we could make it go in if we wanted. You could make it go back out. And that's how you're going to do those extrusions, just by pressing the X key, double clicking, and then moving it however you'd like it to be. Okay, now if we were to do a circular building, using the building preset tool, you would just hit Alt-Z on your keyboard, and that's going to switch it to the circular mode for you. So instead of drawing the 2 points and dragging out a square or a rectangle, you're just going to go across the diameter, and it's going to automatically make that circle for you. So however, wide you want your circle to be, just draw it, and there it is. Now, if you don't have the building preset tool, you can still draw a beautiful circle. You're just going to take your draw tool and just kind of trace a circle however you would like it. It's going to be a little wonky because nobody can draw a perfect circle, so don't worry about that. Once you've got it all closed, you're going to hit the O key on your keyboard and it'll fix it right up and make it all even for you, so you don't have to stress out about, perfectly placing each one of your nodes. If there's one thing about JOSM, is that there's always a shortcut. So if you don't know it, there probably is one, I promise. And then you can just add your tag to that, just building equals yes, and it'll fill in, and now it's a nice circular building for us. I can also demonstrate creating a building with a courtyard very quickly. I don't think there's one in this imagery, so we might have to pretend, but that's okay. Let's say we have a building with a courtyard right here in this field. So with our building plugin tool selected, we're going to hit Alt-R, bring us back into square building mode from the circular mode. And what we're going to do is just pretend there's a building here with a courtyard, and we are just mapping every area around that center courtyard. Like that. And then by hitting the shift button, if you're creating a courtyard or merging elements like this, typically when you're making buildings, I would always say make sure your nodes are not connected. You can tell they're connected because they'll be a little bigger than the average node. However, since we're going to put all of these features into one building, it doesn't matter as much right now, but just something to keep in your mind when you're mapping regularly. So just hold down the shift button and you can click all 4 of those features. And then you can either use your keyboard, you can hold shift and hit the J button, and it'll all become one feature. It's a little, not the prettiest house, but that's okay. Or if you would like to do it a different way, you can select all of your features and come up here to tools, and it'll let you create a multi-polygon. Oh, not exactly sure why that did not work for me. Let's try. I believe if you're doing the multi-polygon tool, it is easiest to, instead of doing like the 4 separate rectangles that were shown in the PowerPoint, it's easiest to do one big rectangle and then one smaller one to represent the courtyard. So here you would be outlining the building and you would be outlining the courtyard. And then you can just select both of them, hit tools, create multi-polygon, and here you see it's going to cut out the center for you. So those are 2 different ways. I personally think that the create multi-polygon way is easier because you only have to make 2 rectangles as opposed to 4 with the other method that we saw. But it's about whatever works for you. I would note, however, that if you try to move this outer rectangle, the inside courtyard is not going to move with you. So they do not move as one piece, even though they are a multi-polygon that shares attributes. They don't move as one piece. So just keep that in mind. Kind of make sure your rectangles are where you want them before you create the multi-polygon.
Annika, can I add one thing? This is awesome, and I'm glad you showed
Oh.
both ways.
Yeah, of course. Go
Do
ahead.
that. If you want your polygons that you're creating, be it in the 2-polygon where you make the donut, or you're combining the 4 of them, if you want all your edges to be perpendicular and square with each other, when you draw that first polygon, select it, then draw the other ones. Because once you have a particular feature selected, every polygon, every building you draw after that will be sort of parallel and perpendicular to that initial one that's selected. So yeah, if you just draw a random polygon or building right now and then select it.
Yeah, so just kind of to demonstrate what Richard's talking about. So if I had this selected while I went to draw another one, it would automatically kind of line those up to make them even. Let's say, see if I have this one selected and I want to do like a diagonal, say there's like a diagonal building right next to it, it won't let me do that because it's basing the feature that I'm drawing off the selected feature. And so it wants to keep it, you know, like nice and in line and crisp with that feature that I have selected.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just keep that in mind. And then just really quickly, I will just show you guys how to select a feature that has already been mapped and just kind of, you know, rotate it, resize it. So if you see a feature that's already been mapped, but maybe it just needs a little tweaking, you're going to come up here to see your select tool, click on it so it highlights red. And then if you'd like to rotate it, you can hit Control-Shift. You see that your cursor will change to these little arrows. That'll let you rotate the building however you'd like. You get a nice diagonal building or just straighten it out a little bit. With the building selected, if you would like to resize it, you can hit the Control and Alt buttons. You see, again, my cursor is changing to let me know, you know, how I'm about to affect this feature. And then you can just drag it out to make it larger, drag it in to make it smaller, things like that. And again, if there's a feature that's just not right and there's just no salvaging it, you can just hit the delete button on your keyboard and just completely get rid of it. But yeah, that is about all I think for my JOSM demo. There are still a few slides left in the PowerPoint, but I'll just pause here and ask if anybody has any questions that they would like to, you know, questions that they feel would be helped if they saw me map in JOSM before I switch back to the PowerPoint. So if there's anything you would like to see me draw or trace out again, just feel free to ask, and I'll pause for a minute to let you do that. Chat there. Okay, it doesn't sound like there are any questions, so I will just switch back to the PowerPoint and get this finished up for you guys.
We have about 20 minutes left, so you're aware.
Okay, so now that you've kind of seen us load into JOSM, you've seen us download JOSM, load in our data, you know, download or whatever plugins we'd like, and you've seen us map a few features. So these are just kind of general things to keep in mind as you continue mapping. Frequently upload your features. In just a moment, I can switch back to JOSM and show you how to do this. But I would say probably every 10 or so edits that you're making, you're going to want to upload those changes to OSM. When you upload your changes, please make sure to add a change set comment. This is just a little comment that's going to let other people know, you know, this is what I did. I mapped roadways, or, you know, I've squared buildings. Just a quick little blurb about the edits that you've made, so that if somebody else sees it and they think maybe there's an issue with it, or they're just kind of curious what you're doing, they'll have some context and can kind of see what you've been mapping. And then just another tip, in case you were mapping a task from the hot tasking manager or the teach tasking manager, and you would like to load it to edit it into JOSM instead of the ID editor, The first thing that you have to do is you have to make sure that JOSM is already open and running on your computer, or it's going to pop up an error for you. It won't open it automatically. It's just, you've got to do that part. So ensure that JOSM is open and running. Find whatever project you would like to contribute to in whichever tasking manager. And then at the bottom, when you're on the screen that lets you contribute to a task, at the very bottom, it'll have an editor button. And typically under the editor button, it always says ID editor. That's set as the default. You can just click on that button and switch it to JOSM. You can also go into the settings of your OpenStreetMap account and change the settings so that it always opens with JOSM instead of ID editor. If that's something, if you find that you really like it, that's something you can just have it do automatically for you. Even if it is set as your automatic editing software, you still have to open JOSM separately before the tasking manager will let you load in tasks. So just keep that in mind as well, or else you're just gonna keep getting an error pop up. So. Okay, and this is just another kind of quick note about saving and uploading. It just kind of reiterates that, you know, when this upload box pops up, you should add a comment describing whatever work you've done. So, you know, mapping new roads, or, you know, mapping new buildings, or, you know, ungluing stuck buildings, whatever you're doing, just leave a comment so people know. It also will take note of whatever imagery you're using. So if you have multiple imagery layers up, it'll pull all of them. And so sometimes it's nice to leave a comment to say, you know, hey, I know it looks like I used like 3 different imageries, but I used Bing to do this, or I used Maxar imagery, or whatever imagery you're using. Just make sure you're giving your edits some context when you're uploading them. And then when you go to do your first upload, JOSM's just going to ask you to connect your OpenStreetMap account. You should just be able to log in one time, and then they should be connected and you won't have to worry about it anymore. But if you get that pop-up, that's just, it just wants you to log into your OSM account really quickly. And then after you upload these changes on JOSM, you should just be able to see them right on OpenStreetMap. You can log in to open the OpenStreetMap, zoom into whatever area you've been editing, and you should be able to see your changes appear on the map. Sometimes it takes a few minutes. So, you know, if you're uploading an edit and then immediately going to check, you might not see it, but it should be up there for you guys to see, and for everybody else to see. So hopefully you're making some quality edits. And this slide is just a bunch of keyboard shortcuts for JOSM. Like I said, if there's one thing about JOSM, it's that there is a shortcut for everything. They are extremely helpful. So, you know, if you take nothing away from this presentation, you should take away this slide, because it will make your mapping so much smoother and faster and easier. And like I said, this slide, along with all the resources linked within it, will be shared with you after the presentation. So you will have access to this. Right. Thank you, guys. I'm just going to pop back over to JOSM really quickly to kind of show you the uploading process, and then I will pass it back off to Richard and he can wrap us up. Okay, so here we are back in JOSM where we were. Here are all our lovely edits we've been making. Like I said, every 10 or so edits, you're going to come up here to where it says File, scroll all the way down, and it'll have this little green arrow with the Upload Data button. You're just going to click that. If there's any issues with what you've mapped, any errors, anything, you know, not lining up the way JOSM wants it, you'll get a pop-up. Some of these warnings can be ignored. For instance, if you like don't know the name of a highway or something, other ones should definitely be fixed. So just try to make sure that you're not uploading, you know, data sets with a ton of errors in them. And again, there are good resources to kind of help you figure out what's wrong with these errors if they pop up, but we're just going to hit continue upload. And here is the pop-up box where it allows you to leave a change set comment, and it allows you to select the imagery that you used. So we're going to select Bing for the imagery because that's the imagery I used. And then for the change set comment, you can just add something like, you know, added new roadways, mapped new buildings, you know, etc., whatever you did. Then you can click this button that says, I would like someone to review my edits. If you're a new mapper and you're not, you know, 100% confident on everything that you're doing yet, I would recommend selecting it. If you're a mapper who's a little bit more comfortable, you know, it's kind of an optional thing. But you select it, and then you would just come down here and hit the upload data button. And then it'll take a few seconds to upload. If you've done a lot of edits in the change set that you're uploading, it may take a little longer. But yeah, so that's the uploading process. I'm not actually going to hit the button since I created buildings that do not actually exist, and I don't want those to be visible on OpenStreetMap. But just to show you guys where it's at, this is the upload data button. It's under the file tab. And that's where you'll go to upload your edits once you're satisfied with them. So yeah, that's all for my section of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and if there are none, I will pass it back over to Richard.
We did have a couple of questions here, actually, Monica. Thank you very much. A couple people asked about seeing how to make a circular building again, and how to do the multi-polygon building. So either method. We've got
Yes.
about 13 minutes or so. We'll give a quick demo on how those could be done again, please.
Yeah, of course. So for circular buildings, I think there are some circular buildings in this data set. So let's just go over here and map a real building. So maybe it is a little more clear. If you're just using your draw nodes tool, you're just going to come in and just trace around the building. See how that highlighted as I was trying to trace? That means the node is trying to stick to that building. And we do not want that because they are separate features. So just kind of take note of that. And we're just going to trace around the circular feature. Like I said, it does not have to be perfect because there will be a way to fix it. After the feature is closed, we're going to hit our select tool, make sure it's selected. And we're going to come over here and map it as a building. So building equals yes. Now that it's properly mapped as a building, you can see it's filled in. And now we're just going to hit the O key on our keyboard, and it's going to even all the nodes out and make it a nice, perfect circle for us, even though we did not originally map it that way. And then if you have the building tools plugin installed, what you're going to do is you're going to select that plugin. You're going to hit Alt-Z. And you notice when I do that, it goes from the little icon next to my cursor goes from like a square to kind of like a cylindrical object. And that's just letting us know that we're in circular building mode. And to draw a circle with this plugin, all you do is just cross the diameter. So you just got to do one line for that one. Just like that. And then you'll come over here to the tags, and you can see it's already been marked as a building, so you wouldn't have to add a tag to that. So those are how you do your circular buildings. And then I'll just show again how to do the multi-polygon buildings. So multi-polygons are useful for, you know, if you're doing a building with a courtyard, or maybe you're doing like a lake that has an island in it, any kind of weird feature like that. So to create a multi-polygon, the first thing we're going to do is draw our first shape. Presumably this would be the shape of the house, so we're going to make it a square. And then inside of that, we would just trace out, we're just going to imagine there's a courtyard here. We would just trace out the shape of that courtyard. As it is, you can see that these are both mapped as buildings. So this would pop up as two buildings on top of each other, which is not what we want. So we're going to select one with our selection tool. We're going to hold down our shift key, and then we're going to select the second building or the second feature. Come up here to your tools tab. And then you have a button that says create multi-polygon. You can also do this by hitting Control B on your keyboard. but this is where the button is for anyone that would like to do it manually this way. Hit create multi-polygon, and then you can see it will empty out this courtyard section and just leave us with the rectangle that goes all the way around. And it should, when you create multi-polygons, it should keep the existing tags. So if we come over here, we can see that it's tagged as a multi-polygon, as a building, and it is recognizing that there are two features in this multi-polygon. There's this outer edge and this inner edge. And like I said, if you go to move the outer or inner edge, they will not move as one piece just by creating a multi-polygon this way. So just keep that in mind when you're creating them, that if you want to move it around after you've created it, you're going to have to move it in two separate pieces. So, you know, just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about the order of the way you're editing and creating things. But yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Annika. There was another question about knowing the direction of line features like rivers or a road, since the editing area should get to a specific square. And Sarah, thank you for throwing a note in there. Yeah, just from the imagery itself, it's oftentimes hard to tell if you're just tracing a river, you haven't got it connected to anything else. Of course, once you draw a feature, it'll actually have arrows identifying the direction, that's sort of the from and the to direction when you are tracing a particular way. But when you're tracing it in a area without any other context, it's very, very difficult. And when it comes to streets and roads, unless you know, again, if you have like actual knowledge of that area, that you know this is a one-way street and it goes east, it's hard to know looking from satellite imagery if you're not familiar with it. But if it's rivers, sometimes you maybe zoom out and look for other rivers that are in the similar area and identify is this a tributary to the larger river that's sort of maybe a short distance away, then that might give you an idea of which way to trace it. But I'm glad you brought up that question, because when we're tracing features, we want to be as realistic as possible. So when we're tracing water features, we want to make sure we're tracing downstream. If it's a road feature, a highway of some sort, and it is one way, we want to make sure we trace in the direction of that way. So try to make it, again, the data as realistic as possible. But thank you very much, Annika and Maxwell. Job well done, and I appreciate all you guys for coming and attending today. A couple other notes I would say when learning JOSM, the best thing you can do is just spend some time in front of the software. There's a lot of information given to you today, and there's a lot of shortcuts, but don't worry about learning all those shortcuts. We have that, as Annika showed you, that little shortcut cheat sheet that's there. But remember, all those shortcuts, if you go to the tools or the more tools menu item, the actual tools are there, right? The actual sort of function you're looking for will be there. Next to it will be the shortcut right next to it. So you'll learn one or two as you start, and then as you use more tools, you become more familiar with it, you will add more shortcuts to your repertoire. So when you start using shortcuts, you'll find that your editing will go much more quickly, especially if you have a mouse. And so typically I have my right hand, because I'm right-handed on my mouse, left hand on the keyboard, and I'm constantly changing the tool that I'm using a shortcut oftentimes, or if I don't know it, I will go to the menu bar and go to tools, or go to more tools. And then I'll use my mouse to actually draw the feature itself or select features and whatnot. But again, it's just like with any software, practice. Just get in front of it and start doing it. And I would suggest even downloading data from your hometown, or maybe where your parents are from, or something like that, and just start tracing. And once you get comfortable with some of those tools, then go ahead and go into the tasking manager, identify a particular task, and then start tracing. The next session, we are planning another training session in mid-August. So the week of August 14th, we don't have an exact date yet, but this will be on advanced JOSM. So it'll be more JOSM, perhaps a little review of what we've done here, but looking at some more tools and different things that you guys can use to really sort of build up your JOSM skills. So what I suggest, if you hope to come back to the next training, is start using JOSM regularly. Whenever you are editing in OSM, make JOSM the go-to editor that you use, and slowly you'll become more proficient with it. And then, as I mentioned in the next session, which will be, again, mid-August, we'll be emailing everybody the dates and putting that out over our social media when we have that nailed down. And we'll have a session on advanced JOSM. So bringing these skills up, just up a notch with JOSM to make sure you're more familiar with all the sort of great tools. I mentioned previously, and Annika just mentioned as well, anybody that's registered for this seminar, it doesn't matter if you sort of had to drop out and came in early or came in late, the recording will be shared with everybody, as well the slides. Okay, so you have all those materials at your disposal for when you need them. Okay, so we are just, pardon me, a couple minutes a few minutes before the actual end time. At this point, are there any questions from anybody, including anything that we feel we've missed from Maxwell or Annika or the rest of the team? The floor is open. All right, perfect. I will start recording while I'm thinking about it.